Good afternoon. Welcome to the Monday, August 12th meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission. First item on the agenda is roll call. Tim Gilbert, Chair, is present. Cindy Bremer, Vice Chair.
Present.
Alder Veronica Corpus-Dax.
Present.
Commissioner Lisa Hanson.
Present.
Commissioner Jacob Miller. Present. Commissioner Randall Petrowski.
Detained by a train.
Detained by a train.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
That one again.
Of course.
And Commissioner Jerry Wisbiski.
Present.
Thank you. Next item.
I think the bridge is up.
Could be.
Yeah, that's what's going
Well,
on.
the train was
It's a
stopped
train
when
Yeah.
it was stopped.
Yeah.
Next item, approval of the agenda for the August 12th, 2019
Motion
meeting.
approved.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wisbiski, a second by Commissioner Hanson to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. Next item, approval of the minutes from the July 8th, 2019 meeting of the Grand Bay Plan Commission.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Burmer to approve, a second by Commissioner Hanson to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. We have two public hearings tonight. And these public hearings have been properly posted and public notification has been published in the Green Bay Press Gazette. The Plan Commission is interested in hearing public comments on the subject's agenda items. We invite your comments and ask that after your name has been called, you state your address, or you state your name, your address, whether you represent a group or association, and whether you favor, oppose, or are only providing information in the matter. And then obviously your comments and concerns. We also ask that you confine your testimony to the facts related to the proposal at hand and try to avoid repetitive testimony. You must be recognized by the Plan Commission in order to speak, and please address your comments to the chair. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes. We will now open the public hearing on CPA 19-03, a request to amend the city's comprehensive plan for the property located at 2607 Nicolay Drive from commercial to low-density residential, submitted by Robert Mock on behalf of Shekinah Glory LLC, property owner. Is there anybody that wishes to speak on this?
Yep, I can speak.
Yes, sir.
My name is John Mashad. My
You can
address,
come up to the-
I'm sorry.
Oh, motion to open from the floor.
Second.
Public hearing.
Oh, that's right.
Public hearing.
The floor is open by definition.
Okay, proceed.
John Mashad. My address is 2603 Nicolay Drive, which is adjacent to the subject parcel. And really, this is probably the best thing that could happen for this property. And I'm all for it. That's about all I have. There's not going to be any traffic, parking, or any other issues associated with the other zoning, so I think it's best, it's the best use.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Yes, Alder Dorf.
I don't have any strong feelings either way. I'm just curious as to what is the Shekinah Glory LLC and what is being planned to put there? Is there something, is it purchased? Is there a home that's going to be put there? Do we know any of that?
R1 is pretty restricted.
That's
Staff
the
would have
current,
to address that.
that's the current owner of the
Does
parcel.
staff have any information on that?
Yeah.
That is the current owner, the LLC is the current owner of the property. The applicant, Bob Mock, I believe is working on behalf of a client who wishes to build a single-family home on that property.
Okay.
So the owner, the current owner is not the one building the home on the property.
The current owner is
Correct.
Shekinah Glory.
So the current owner, and then they're selling it or whatever is going to happen, there's going to be a home built there, or we're just zoning it residential and that's all that can be put there.
I think the future property owner is doing due diligence to get the property zoned appropriately to build
Okay.
a home.
Okay, thank you, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
My name is Roger Georgia, and we live adjacent to the property, 2611 Nicolay Drive, which is right next door. And I'm definitely in favor of being a home.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak on this? Would anybody else like to speak on this? Does anybody else wish to speak? Okay, hearing none, let the record reflect that nobody else came forward. This public hearing will now be closed. The next public hearing is CPA 19-04, a request to amend the city's comprehensive plan for various parcels located in the Shipyard neighborhood, submitted by the Department of Community and Economic Development. Is there anybody that wishes to speak on this? Yes, sir.
My name is Chris Bazile, on a property on 200 South Maple. And according to looking at the letter that was sent out, currently that property is a 4-unit. And so my question would be is this going to be grandfathered in to be continued as a 4-unit? We got 4 different maps on what's proposed or what isn't. It looks like their proposal is to make it 1 or 2 family properties. But then this, it says it's grandfathered in, new zoning only takes effect when change or expansion in that grandfathered use is proposed. So I guess the question would be, okay, is it going to be grandfathered in as current use as a 4-unit? And then also, does this mean when we decide to liquidate that it has to be sold as a single or 2-family, or it can be sold as an existing 4-unit investment property as it is now? How is this going to impact, you know, because we bought it, I mean, I bought it as my retirement.
Again, I will refer to that.
I'm actually taking the lead on this one, surprisingly. We can discuss a little bit more when the zoning action comes up about property-specific things, but everything that exists now will continue to exist in perpetuity as it's grandfathered into our code. So if you have an existing 4-unit, it would stay as a 4-unit for as long as you would like it to remain that way. The only time that grandfather lapses is if you've had that unit be vacant for more than 12 months, or if you want to expand that use in some house. If you wanted to have 2 additional units, then that wouldn't be allowed, or you'd have to get a conditional use permit depending on what zoning district we're going towards.
Okay.
So we can go over the specifics of your property a little bit more after the meeting if you would like, but there are only 4 properties that have that grandfathering, so I'm not sure if you looked through that list to see if that was one of them.
Did it say for sure?
Well,
But we can discuss this further when we get to the next
Is it-
item.
Yeah, there's an action that's specific to the zoning, so I might be able to
Yeah.
answer more questions at that time.
All right, because, well, and then would that be the time to ask also, now, if we sell the property, does the grandfather clause continue with the new buyers?
Yes,
Or
if
do they
something's
have
in
to-
existing use, there's no change at all. It only changes again if that you want to expand that use
Okay.
or it gets discontinued. So if it's an occupied 4-unit and you sell it as an occupied 4-unit, it would remain that way.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak on this? Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this? Yes, sir.
My name is Gary Van Sistine, and I own a couple of properties in that area. And I read the letter, but I own a property at 824 South Broadway, and it's C1, and it says permitted to permitted. I don't know if I understand exactly what that means. And sorry if I'm being ignorant here. I just need to understand I called somebody and just wanted to check in. I know I'd like to make some improvements at 824 South Broadway. In particular, probably blacktop a parking lot, which is not real big, but it would be nice to have a blacktop. And then and I know there's a procedure to go through for all that, and I'll do my best to follow that. I have another property. It's at 613 Hubbard, corner of Hubbard and Ashland. But that's not in your plan, apparently. That's just on the outside, even though it goes all the way to Ashland. Is there any particular reason why that kind of property is not included? Because I could do improvements there too. Or is this not the proper time?
It's just not part of the Shipyard.
Okay, fine.
Development.
It just isn't?
But we can address this further again with item,
Yeah.
agenda number 4, when we do the
Okay.
rezoning. We can-
It sure seems like it would fall in that district, but you'll have to tell me that.
Yeah.
So can somebody answer my permitted to permitted?
Yeah, we can address that further at the,
Okay.
on the agenda item number 4, when we get there.
Agenda item number 4.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak on this? Is there anybody else that wants to speak? Is there anybody else? Okay, let the record reflect that no one else came forward. This public hearing is also now closed. Next item, regular business. Item 1, consideration with possible action on the request to amend the city's comprehensive plan for the property located at 2607 Nicolay Drive from commercial to low density residential, submitted by Robert Mock on behalf of Shinnecock Glory LLC property owner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request for a comprehensive plan amendment from commercial to low-density residential. I just want to clarify in the title heading that it has a C1 and an R1. Those should not be included. It should be just commercial to low-density residential. Those will appear later as part of the zoning petition. This is a future land use change or amendment. And then it affects 2607 Nicolay Drive. That property is highlighted in red here along Nicolay in the bay and UWGB to the east. This is an area mainly of single-family homes along the bay, of course, the university and Red Smith development up here. There was a previous comprehensive plan amendment change in this area. There's also been some rezoning that was to accommodate a bed and breakfast development that never occurred here. This is the former Carlton restaurant site. That building was raised. The current owners tried to get that bed and breakfast up and running, and that failed. That did not work. So what's happened since is that there is a new prospective buyer who hopes to purchase the property and get a rezone for a single-family home. The current zoning also still remains at C1. So the process here is to amend the comprehensive plan to low-density residential. That would free up them to make the application and follow up with the zoning change to low-density R1, and that's an item later in the agenda. So we've gone through the notification process for the comp plan amendment. There are some criteria that's listed within your agenda tonight, and we are supporting the request from commercial to low-density residential as a future land use.
Thank you. Commissioner Wojcicki.
I'm interested to know, did somebody actually purchase this property now, and who's actually applying for this change?
Bob Mock from Mock 4 is the applicant on
Okay.
behalf of the current property owner. I don't know if it's been made public or not who the prospective buyer is at this point.
Okay.
I suspect they're doing due diligence to get the necessary zoning in place to complete the transaction. That's just speculation.
Is that normal circumstance that you approve a rezoning to someone who is not really the owner of the property?
Well, it's to the current owner of the property. I think the future owner may have a different intended use for the property, but certainly it's to the current property. So they're in essence taking a down zoning of the property.
So
They're taking a chance from going to a commercial to a residential district.
So we're rezoning this with the current owner who has basically title or lack of anything else to that property?
Right.
Because he's actually applied for it, or
Correct.
they have.
And this, again, is the comprehensive plan. This is the first, another item in the agenda will be the actual rezoning request.
Okay. The only other thing I got to see is sometimes time heals all.
Hope so.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Henson, a second by Commissioner Petrowski to approve the recommendation, or to approve the action. Is there any other discussion, any further discussion? No, hearing none, I would ask if you cast your vote.
Approved unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Next item, consideration with possible action on the request to amend the city's comprehensive plan for various parcels located in the Shipyard neighborhood submitted by the Department of Community and Economic Development.
Thank you. As I'm sure some of you have probably heard, we're redeveloping a project called the Shipyard in the North Mason. With that, our department and the other departments within City Hall have been taking a really good close look at this neighborhood, wanting to make sure that we're doing a lot of investment into the existing neighborhood versus letting people come in and modify in ways that we don't find appropriate. So there's been some financial investment throughout City Hall, and our team also made a Shipyard investment plan. So with that, these are the boundaries that were determined to be the Shipyard neighborhood. So this is generally bounded by Walnut, Ashland, I think that's 5th or 6th Street on the far end, and then the river. And then Shipyard proper will be in this area here, and the rest of this is just considered the Shipyard neighborhood. So with that investment strategy, that's mostly an internal document for us to guide how to invest money, where that investment is, and what kind of strategies we want to use for this neighborhood. It became very clear that some of the plans in this area, some of our master plan documents really conflict with one another. The ones that did have the same things weren't reflected in our existing comprehensive plan, so we opted to do a mass overhaul of the comp plan and the zoning in this area. So we'll start with the comp plan changes. This looks a little different from the normal mass we use, but there's so much data here. There's about 350 parcels, so it's taken a while to do this. So as you can see now, this isn't very cohesive. There are some chunks that will remain basically the same, the downtown, the high-intensity retail office down in this area. But there are also pockets of higher density housing, some things that jut in and out that don't really match with what exists there currently and what we would like to see for the future. So for the major changes, we're really just kind of cleaning up the boundaries of what already exists. So as you can see here, this low to medium density residential along Ashland area, that mostly remains the same. We're calling for a little bit higher density around Mason Street. But beyond that, it's basically just reflecting what's already there. We have some singles, some twos, some multis, and all that can be represented with these classifications. One of the other large changes you'll see right here, this had the medium to high density residential. This is the strip along Broadway, and then right next to the coal piles, which has basically been commercial, will be commercial. We propose it to be commercial, so that's reflected here as well. With the addition of adding some of this along 4th Street, the city owns a lot of property here. The Green Bay Bicycle Collective has their garage there. It already has a kind of semi-commercial feel, so we think that's the best use for that area. The only other major changes that happened would be some of this in here. This is kind of messy. It had some industrial zoning, it has some like really chaotic land uses on it, so we just decided to clean it up and just extend that downtown and then do some medium intensity housing and office retail to capture that OR feel that kind of exists there, that office residential. So with the changes that are proposed here will be reflected in the zoning action, which is next 2 down on the agenda. To make sure that there's more of a cohesive plan is looking at like where the residential is permitted, where it should be permitted, what types of residential uses. We're really trying to make sure that the existing homeowners are represented here. We don't want to be shooing anybody out. We want people to invest in the properties that already exist. So the future land use changes and then also the zoning changes reflect that as part of our investment strategy.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion
Well,
on?
I have a question, just because I know it pertains to somebody in the audience too. I also own a property in the 200 block of South Maple, and I feel awful for, I thought it was already zoned R2, so for it to go to R2 is not a big deal, but, so it was office residential, and now it's R2, which my understanding of R2 can be a 2, 3, 4 family property, correct? For R2?
Two-family and,
I think it's a CUP for multi.
yeah, for 3 and 4 unit, it's a CUP.
Okay.
1 and 2s are permitted by right.
So R2, 1 and 2 is permitted, but 3 or 4 would have to be a CUP, which is what the change is. You'd have to do the CUP or to a CUP.
And 4 would be the max, you couldn't go any higher than that.
Right, okay. Because those properties are fairly small anyway.
Yeah,
Okay,
you'd have to meet all the dimensional regulations as well, so
right.
couldn't just take a single.
I just remember at one point I asked the question, if mine burned down, would I be able to build it up as a 3-family again? And they were like, oh, it's R2, so probably, but.
And that's a different issue as well. I mean, if there is a natural disaster, you can rebuild to the same footprint and same use within a year.
Okay.
So that,
But in either case, right, as of right now, it'd be grandfathered in.
Right, any
Right.
property would be grandfathered in.
Right.
And again, that's specific to the rezoning. The comp plan is just amending these future land uses here.
You're right, I'm sorry.
Yep. Thank you. Any further discussion among commissioners?
Just a little bit more information. The biggest changes are to R2, that is, the
First, the
largest
zoning?
number of properties
Yes.
are being shifted to R2. What was the general reason for that? What can you tell me to understand?
Mostly to reflect what's existing on the ground. There's a lot of
Okay.
singles and a lot of doubles. The R2 captures both of those as a permitted use versus the OR, you'd have to get the conditional use permit for the single. To go R1, you'd have to get it for the double, and that doesn't really make much sense for what's existing and what people have been investing in already in that neighborhood. So the R2 just captures all the things that are allowed, the things that we would like as a conditional use. So the majority, when you get to the zoning, you'll see the majority of the top portion will just be mostly R2.
So it avoids a lot of bureaucratic hassle then?
Yes, less applications, it brings, I have some data for the zoning portion of this, a lot of properties will be going into compliance, which is really our ultimate goal here, so.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Well, and just remind that we're talking about the comprehensive plan versus zoning, which I messed up on already.
It's very tricky, for a planner, it's really hard to understand all the
Sorry, I didn't-
ins and outs, so.
Motion to open the floor.
Okay, we have a motion to open the floor. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a motion by Commissioner Henson, a second by Commissioner Wasbiski to open the floor for public comment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Does anybody wish to speak on this? Keeping in mind that this is strictly for the comprehensive plan and not the zoning part of it.
Hi, my name's Paul Busher, I live at 1120 Elizabeth. And I like the downtown plan, but it's kind of set in concrete in some ways. If you wanted to build a university downtown to bring life back to this downtown, because the downtown is dead on Sundays. Most stores close on Sundays. If you really want to revitalize it, you need to bring youth to the area, you need to bring jobs like professors. So if we could put a university in this area, it could really invigorate the area.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this? Thank you. We will, yes, sir.
Seth Lens, I own a property at 416 to 424 Clinton Street. My question is there any other differences in taxes, tax brackets, if you're in the downtown area from whatever it currently is now? So if you switch, is there a different tax for being downtown properties?
I believe we assess on use, not zoning classification in the city, correct?
Correct. So the assessor, when they look at the property, they basically look how it's being used, and so it's separate from the zoning.
Okay, so property taxes pretty much won't change unless the use changes.
Correct.
Which would have to come in and get some kind of
Right, or you make a
application
change to
for
the
it.
structure and, right, put an addition or remodel, the assessor will come back up.
All right, sounds good. I just didn't know if there was like a downtown tax or anything. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this? Thank you.
Motion to close the floor.
Second?
We have a motion by Commissioner Henson, a second by Commissioner Wasbiski to close the floor to the regular business. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are back. Is there any further discussion?
I move to approve the request.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Petrowski to approve the recommendation, a second by Commissioner Brimmer. Any further discussion? Hearing none, would you please cast your vote?
Unanimously approved.
Thank you. Next item. Item 3, consideration with possible action on the request to rezone 2607 Nicolay Drive from general commercial to low-density residential, submitted by Robert Mott on behalf of Shekinah Group LLC property owner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the follow-up request to number 1. So this is the rezoning of 2607 from general commercial C1 to low-density residential R1 based on the action of item number 1. So again, this is the property in question. There was a former rezoning in this area that did clean up some zoning back in 2015, and this property was left because at that time there was plans for that bed and breakfast. So since that time, that project has failed, and now they're moving on with a different project. So staff has notified affected property owners, again, within that 200-foot radius. We haven't received any calls or any objections, probably more support than anything. So we are recommending approval of the request to rezone 2607 Nicolay.
Thank you.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Hanson, a second by Commissioner Waspisky to approve the recommendation. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, the chair would ask that you cast your vote.
Unanimously approved.
Thank you. Please keep in mind that these recommendations will be going to the city council meeting next Tuesday, I believe. And that'll be the final determination, so if you want to, you can attend those to follow through on this. The next item is item 4, consideration with possible action on the request to rezone various parcels located in the Shipyard neighborhood, submitted by the Department of Community and Economic Development.
Thank you. So again, one of my self-created maps. This is our existing zoning. So as you can see, lots of bits and pieces of different types of zoning. Most notably, we have the very heavy OR district that is just south of Ashland, or just east of Ashland. And then the R1 district here paired with the R3, and then some random commercial and OR within this area on that side of Mason Street. With the change that we're proposing, we are getting rid of all of the industrial that is in this pocket here. It's a really inappropriate use considering its proximity to the neighborhood and then also to the shipyard. But we are retaining the light industrial that is against the waterway. I mean, it's named the Shipyard. It's got an industrial feel to it anyway, and these are good users, good tenants, so we're hoping that we can work with them to do maybe some facade improvements, but ultimately they are pretty solid uses on the waterway, so those are being retained. The D1 district is being expanded to cover where those industrial pockets were prior. But that's mostly the only expansion of that D1 district. The OR district up here is becoming an R2 district. And then if you can remember from the land use map, we had this as that medium intensity versus the low medium, and that's where that OR is being reflected. Clinton may become a more secure corridor once the shipyard is here, so we want to make sure that's got a little bit more flexibility if any commercial uses wanted to go into that area. And then again, with the expansion of that C1 district, this is all basically commercial anyway. This is a good area to have some more commercial expansion, especially against that ramp there for East Mason Street. So we wanted to make sure that was reflected within the zoning. The pink stars that are noted are the only 4 properties that are being negatively impacted, which basically means they're grandfathered in with their existing uses. So with those, there are a single family, a 2-family, and then 2 multis. And with that, they would be able to retain, again, unless there's a lapse within the use of 12 months, or if they wanted to expand those uses. The lots are too small to really do any expansion, so I imagine it'd be if they lapse in their uses. But beyond that, almost everything is in the positive. So of the total 346 parcels, 40% of them are being brought into compliance. So right now, they're either not permitted or conditional by our existing zoning, so we're bringing them into compliance. 56 of them are having no change. Either they're going from a permitted zoning use to another permitted use, a conditional use to another conditional, or we just haven't recommended a change for them. And then 3.5% are going from a permitted to a conditional use. So with that, 99% of the uses that are existing in here are allowed by our code, either through conditional or just being permitted. So it is that 1%, those 4 properties that have the grandfathering system. I have not heard from any of those property owners. I don't know if they're present, but of the uses there, again, the parcels aren't large enough to really do an expansion, so we thought it was to the best benefit, especially because they're pocketed within some of our recommendations, and we don't want to have that pocketed situation anymore. We'd like the larger districts. So with that, we're recommending approval. I don't know if there are any other questions. I know that the rezoning can be really tough because it impacts so many people, so we sent out like a 7-page letter trying to detail it, but it can be really convoluted, so I wanted to make sure that if there are any questions, they're all expressed.
What's going to become of that little waterway that's, is that just given up as part of the Fox River? Or?
Yes.
Yes.
That's part of the shipyard. I don't know what we have as public information yet, but some of the conceptual designs have had that be part of the actual shipyard area. So Breakthrough Fuels would be located here, and then this is the shipyard area.
So quite possible surrounding it will be some type of...
Some docking system.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So it'll be part of that larger project area.
Yeah, I think I would have put a D2 right on the left.
Keep that zone, keep the water zone downtown, yeah.
Great.
Any further? Yes.
Question back here.
Are we able to ask questions?
Just a minute, in a minute.
Comment rather than a question, you just mentioned the letter, my compliments. I thought it was a very informative letter and also just very welcoming as far as people being able to check with you on questions. Thank you.
Move to open the floor.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Pertolsky, a second by Commissioner Wospiski to open the floor for public comment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Would anybody like to speak on this? Yes, sir. Again, please give your name and address for the record.
Seth Lenz, I own 416 to 424 Clinton Street. You said the starred areas are the negative impact on, correctly?
The starred parcels have that zoning, yeah.
All right, so does all the other parcels still get the grandfathered too? Because I actually own one of the light industrials that's getting changed. So if it's not starred, is it not grandfathered in?
No, that just means that whatever's existing there is still an allowed use. So we made all these recommendations based off what's existing on the parcel. So if you had something that was either vacant, storage, something that was already allowed in whatever district it's going to, then it has no change really, because if it was a permitted use that's going to permitted, then it's still allowed. If it's permitted, going to conditional.
So the stars are only the negative ones, but everybody
yes,
is
where like if they wanted to expand that use, they'd be able to. But all the other uses are allowed within that zoning
Okay, I just want
district.
to clarify that. All right,
Yes,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Gazile, property at 200 South Maple, which would be here, is the 4-unit I was referring to. And right now, according to the letter, it's going from OR to an R2. And, I mean, is there something, I mean, I don't see anything that says it's grandfathered in.
That's an allowed use then. So on the back of the letter that was sent, it details what those allowable uses are. Yep, so if yours, it wouldn't be considered grandfathered because the use is allowed and promoted within that district. So the 2-family is what the R2 district is basically made for. So there are no changes to your
Right,
property.
but this is a 4-bay.
Okay, so then,
So, I said, I don't have anything that says I'm grandfathered in, let me put it that way.
okay, so within here it says permitted to CUP. So that means that you're going from a 4-family would have been permitted within the OR district. With the zoning change going to R2, you'd have to get a CUP to reestablish that use, but it's already established. So there would be nothing. If you needed to expand that use, you'd have to go through the conditional use process.
So
But
how
again,
do
it's
I have
all
to get
lots.
some permit?
No.
You're good.
Everyone gets to operate
So why
exactly what they're doing
don't
now.
you just leave it as R3 or whatever it would be too?
Pardon?
keep it as, so you don't have all this, I don't know, that's what confused me, because all it says is R2. Well, to me, that says it's not gonna be grandfathered in.
Well, on that letter also, it tells you what the process would be. So the CUP process is detailed in there, but that would only be if you needed to reestablish a use for some reason. But you wouldn't need to at this point. So there are no on-the-ground changes when it comes to zoning. We don't rezone something that the people have to vacate and you have to put something else there.
I guess I don't understand the R2 rating for the 4 unit. I mean, it's.
Well, let's look at the neighborhood in its entirety. So we're looking at your neighbors, we're looking at everything that's around there, and then what the city
I
has planned for.
understand the area, but I mean, I just don't want to have to go through another hoop to maintain what I already have.
There wouldn't be. Not to maintain a property.
I think one of the challenges we look at with zoning is, generally we have to zone right by neighborhood and district. And so this general area, we would like to see things that fit within that R2 zone. Knowing that there may be some pieces within specific parcels that don't, but in general, we would like to see those uses in the R2. And so that's why that parcel, your property is included in there, given that all the ones around it are. So in terms of kind of setting the bar for the neighborhood, that's why yours is included in there. So we don't go through and each parcel has a single different zoning down the street. We kind of know what it is for the neighborhood. But as Ms. Hummel expressed, what it means for you now, if you've been operating it legally, you can continue to do so. And there's nothing you need to do. You won't see any difference. The only time that would happen is if you had it vacant for a year or wanted to expand, add on to your property, then there would be a process. But otherwise, you can operate business as usual.
I guess I just didn't quite understand when you got several different designations.
Oh, yeah, it's very complicated,
But I
but
mean-
we know it's not an easy thing to understand, especially because we're doing the comprehensive plan and the zoning. It gets very convoluted, so.
Yeah, it's just- everything's listed by single address, so that's why I don't understand why it can't just be designated under that address. You know, you have another member on the council with 3 units. Basically, it's the same situation.
But I mean, realistically, I have a three family on that block, and you have a 4-family. Neither of them were office residential or R2. So neither of those properties fit within the existing zoning or the proposed zoning. But really what they're looking at, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that any future houses that go in there, if their house is demolished or rebuilt, that they want it to fit that R2 zoning. But we are grandfathered in as long as we keep the properties. If it was a single family that was converted to a multifamily, if you have one apartment vacant for a year, then you lose your grandfathering, is my understanding of it.
Yep, it's that 12-month window that's really important there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Yes, sir.
That pink star on Broadway is dangerously close.
But it's not your property, I promise.
You sure about
Yes,
that?
because you're going permitted to permitted, which means the use that you have is allowed. You have the gold star
See,
here.
I can't see far. Okay, because,
It's kind of in the middle there, you know?
yeah.
PowerPoint is not an exact science.
I neglected to turn the letter over.
Oh.
I now understand what C1 is. Sorry, people don't always use 2 sides of the paper. So I'm good.
Okay.
I'm not the pink star.
Yep, we're good. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this? Okay, thank you.
I move to close the floor.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Brimmer, a second by Elder Corpus Tax, to close the floor and the regular order of business. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are back.
I move to approve the recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Petrowski, a second by Commissioner Wospiski to approve the recommendation. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the chair would ask that you cast your vote.
afraid my tablet has fallen out of the meeting. I'm still here, but the tablet isn't. Yay. I've got a talented neighbor here. Now I'll use that comment.
Got it, unanimously approved.
Thank you. Was unanimously approved. Okay, good. Next item on the agenda, something totally different. Consideration with possible action on the request to authorize a conditional use permit to allow for a plant expansion to exceed the maximum height limitation within the general industrial district at 1919 South Broadway, submitted by Tim Ellsworth, Georgia Pacific Corporation, property owner.
We received an email this morning from the applicant, and they've asked to table this indefinitely. They're putting off their expansion project at this time, and just asked us to basically receive and place on file a request until they're ready to move forward on it.
Okay, thank you.
Move to place on file.
Second?
Oh,
We have-
but I think you want to table it, not receive and place and file.
Oh, got it. That's the circular file, got it.
Right.
Table on
Dismisses it. I think table it just puts it on indefinite hold. A hold puts it, you have to pick a date, and because there was no date specified, I would just table it.
Table it.
So move.
Yeah, move to table.
Okay, so we've got a, we have a motion by Commissioner Spisky, second by Commissioner Hanson to table this item.
Indefinite.
Well,
Indefinite.
table it kind of is, yeah. Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll sure would ask you to cast your vote.
And the vote that we're casting is the vote to table, not the
Table.
vote for the current item,
Correct,
which is
correct.
what's in
A
front of
vote-
us.
Vote to table.
Unanimously approved to table the item.
Thank you. Next item, item 6, consideration with possible action on the request to repeal and recreate Green Bay Municipal Code, Chapter 13-1700, off-street parking, drives, and loading, submitted by the Department of Community and Economic Development.
Great. We had a workshop, well, let me first start. So this this request is from Community Development. It's to repeal the entire existing chapter 13-1700, which deals with our parking, drives, and access, and recreate it as presented in your packet. So the request originally came from Alderman Johnson in April, end of April, requesting the elimination of minimum parking requirements. Staff took a look at that. When we started looking at eliminating minimum parking requirements, we looked at rehabbing the entire code. There were quite a few things in the code that were dated, didn't really follow market trends or current technology or even contemporary practice in traffic engineering or planning. So we cleaned up a lot of that stuff. We held a workshop in June, on June 24th, in front of the Plan Commission. And you'll see in your packet, what you have now is a fully drafted parking code with images and graphics and actual references and everything. A summary of changes, which I have up by section on the screen, and then the existing parking code that we have now. So the colored text matches. Red is new content, blue is augmented content, or revised content. Anything that's in black is still exactly the same as it was prior. Might not be in the same space, but it's same regulation. So since the workshop, we've updated it based on all the comments we received at the workshop, some other comments we received from Public Works. There was a big topic item at the workshop, and that was curbing, the requirement of a 6-inch high curb around every parking lot. You had asked staff to take a look at the cost of that, and I can go through each one of the changes if you want me to. That was the big item, so I'm kind of hit that one. So I just took our north parking lot, just north of this building. I did an analysis on that based on cost. To curb it would be about 9% more. So when I was saying 50 at the workshop, I was way off.
Good.
It's between 9 and 12% more to put curbing around the entire thing. We had pretty extensive discussion at the meeting about, the goal of curbing and what is that if it's not for stormwater, is it for safety? And safety was really the main topic. Partially aesthetics and long-term, health of a value of a property with the curbing is just a nicer development. But if we looked at our same parking lot doing just curbs around where the walkways are, it would be about between a 3 and 6% increase in cost. So about half of what it would be to be the whole thing. So what we did as staff, when we drafted, we said only where they're adjacent to pedestrian walkways. Again, to reflect that safety. We find a lot of the larger developers, they put it in anyway. The city puts in curbing almost everywhere where we put it. It's a safety feature, it directs your storm water, again, for aesthetics. And I think in some cases it makes the life of the parking surface longer because it doesn't crack off at the edges, which is very common. So we do it ourselves. I did also check with some of our neighboring communities and our sister cities in the state. So not too surprising, the larger communities require it, the smaller ones do not. So to give you an example, Oshkosh, Madison, Milwaukee, Neenah all require curbing. Appleton's a little different. They require curbing, barriers, wheel stops as approved per project, so they're kind of a half and half. But then I looked at our directly adjacent communities, so Ashwaubenon, De Pere, Alloway, Bellevue, and Howard. None of them require curbing. So some require wheel stops, some require guards, those metal guards. So when you kind of look at a sort of statewide or larger communities require it, and some of the smaller ones, Neenah is much smaller than us, they require it. But in our market, it's really not a major requirement right now. So I wanted to throw that right at you, what the costs are. We redrafted the code to say just around the walkways, obviously as a vehicle stop. Otherwise, there wasn't too many changes from when we went through the draft at the workshop. One of the things I did add the owner's expense. So if a facility is abandoned, it has to be removed all the way to the street. I don't know, we talked about that as well. A lot of people drive around, they see curb cuts going into the middle of the lawn, and then obviously people using them, driving and parking onto the lawn. It's been practice for the city not to have those removed when the driveway's removed. Needs to come out all the way to the curb line and close that back off. So, I could go through all these if you want me to, or if you just want to hit your hot spots from a workshop. But I think one of the important things in your draft you have is we had our design specialist draw up a bunch of images. The images, they say speak 1,000 words, right? So the text is in there as well, but those images really reflect what the regulations are. And one of the goals of this plan was the reorganization. So you have all your 1 and 2 family regulations in one spot, all your non-1 and 2 families in another spot, and the generals in their own. And those now are also addressed with images as well. So it's kind of nice, somebody's got a single family or does single family, owns a whole bunch of them, they can just grab that section and not really have to wade through all the rest of it. But again, I can answer any questions you want or go through it if you want. That's it.
I'm not going to ask you to go through that. Thank you very much for the care you've taken on this. It's an incredibly complex task, and I appreciate the time you gave us and the help you gave us with the workshop. And so I'm at fault that I did not more earlier go through a very close reading, but I only have one area where I have some concerns, and it is on page 4. The number of off-street parking spaces required by various kinds of land use. And specifically, I'm looking at 2. One of them is the senior or elderly housing, where there are no visitor spaces required. And that seems to me really odd for an elderly housing complex, where you're actually more likely to have cars belonging to visitors than to residents.
Potentially. So again, what we had done with our parking numbers is we have drastically reduced them, and one of the things that we've seen in a lot of communities, especially downtowns, but in some wholesale, are a drastic reduction in required parking. Now, the market still has a parking demand. So we may be saying, and I won't use this one for an example, but let's say it's a commercial entity, an office building. We require 1 stall per 500 square feet.
Right.
They may have an internal model where it's 1 per 300, and they can do that. And it would be the same thing with the housing elements. We're just not dictating that they need more than they need. A bunch of different communities have them at 1 per dwelling unit for senior. A lot of times it depends if you're on a bus line, if it is a senior housing where there's shuttle services. And these are all kind of programs, and senior housing, now this is not, assisted care housing, but where a lot of services are now being provided so the residents don't have to have vehicles. Sort of a hot thing, especially now with Uber, Lyft. Autonomous cars are supposedly supposed to make a big impression on senior housing and also young people as well, people that are driving a lot. So that reduction dropped down to 1 is reflected in that. And that's why we went down. When we were kind of at a gray area, we went with less regulation rather than more.
I understood that, and I appreciate that as a general rule of thumb. What I'm not I guess a follow-up question.
Sure.
If an elderly housing development had 1 space per dwelling unit, could the owners of the development identify some of those as visitor parking?
Sure.
As long as the total number equated to 1 per dwelling unit?
For sure.
That takes care of my concern there. I also have a specific concern under the group daycare center or preschool.
Okay.
Right, the adult family daycare home above that includes 1 drop-off space. And here again, I was confused as to why there was no provision for a drop-off space, particularly with preschoolers who would be dropped off.
Well, so when you're looking at the daycare center and preschool versus the adult and family
Yes.
daycare? So the adult family daycare, that's a use that's done out of your home. So.
Fine, and I'm fine
Yep.
with the adult family daycare,
And
but
the
I'm
drop-off space is
missing
just
the
one
drop-off
open.
space for the next one.
Right, well, that's gonna have 2 spaces per 3 employees on a larger shift, plus 1 per 7 students. So there's that use is gonna have a parking lot. It's gonna be 1 space, 1 parking stall per 7 unit space, per 7 students based on capacity. So that parking lot circulation would be a drop-off area, and then anybody that's there visiting a sick child or picking them up, where they're coming out and going into the building themselves, that there would be a dedicated parking spot there. Now, that would be something, we could require a dedicated drop-off space in here as well. It was just assumed that the drive aisle of a parking lot is going to probably act as that drop-off area.
Okay.
But we could request an additional one. The reason why it's in there for the adult and family daycare is because that's a home site. So it might be just a driveway, and if you have it all parked up, and let's say you're on Ashland, you can't, how are you gonna drop off a child? You can't park on the street, and that's.
Well, I appreciate the inclusion of it for the adults. I'm concerned about the safety of the children at the preschool. And so I think I would, given your response, move to amend this to include plus 1 drop-off space.
I don't know if you want to take, if you have more amendments, if you want to take them all as one. Otherwise, you would need a motion in a second.
I'm making a motion. I'm making a motion. I don't want to complicate things by having 5 things in front of us at 1 minute. I don't know if anybody else considers that important enough to want to second it. And hearing no second, I think it just drops for want of a second. And thanks for your patience with me.
Sure. That's what we're here for.
Is there any further discussion? Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak on this? Okay, thank you.
Then move approval.
Second.
A motion to approve the recommendation by Commissioner Brimmer, second by Commissioner Wispiski. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the chair would ask that you cast your vote.
Still waiting for my vote window.
If it doesn't pop up, we can take your voice vote.
Text the
Still
decision.
nothing.
Okay. How do you vote?
I would vote yes.
All right. Unanimously approved.
Thank you.
This takes a little bit longer, so it's going to be going to the council for action September 17th. So it's got a couple public hearings that are going in between that process and notices that go through, so.
Okay, thank you.
Good job.
Amen.
Next, informational director's report.
All right, so summer schedule, back to July. Your city council took care of a number of items, including CUP for Gothic Court, CUP for 400 South Broadway, which was Shipyard parking lots, vacating Patty Wood Lane. And then also at their report of the Plan Commission, took in, just make sure I got it here, the other actions. Initial reports for the CUP, for St. John's Homeless Shelter, a garage out in Nicolay, and then a flagship lot, CSM for East Town Hall property. And all those were approved as presented. With that, yeah, I just wanted to thank both David, Stephanie. I mean, they've done a ton of work on both items presented here tonight. I mean, these are huge policy things. I think from the shipyard perspective, right? I mean, we've always talked about this reconceptualized shipyard project, and we've seen the cool, fun drawings, but really this is a neighborhood investment strategy and everything that we're doing around there. There's a ripple effect from what we're doing there, and we just want to kind of prepare ourselves for change and do it in a way that respects what's there, but also works towards longer-term goals. And then as far as parking goes, look, I just putting on my economic development hat, that's something that shouldn't ever become a pinch. When I look at creating revenues, a parking lot probably not generating the highest values on a per acre basis. So maybe a little bit, personal in terms of trying to create development on that. But I think in a way, by significantly lowering these minimums, we're going to let the market dictate a little bit more, and really, we don't want to get in the way of potential redevelopment opportunities, especially in our downtown and some of our major corridors that were kind of built pre-auto centric land use. So just thank them for the good work on that, and hopefully we'll cruise these through council and see some great changes resulting from it.
Great, thank you. The date of the next meeting is Monday, September 9th, 2019.
So the August 26th meeting is canceled.
That is correct.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Henson, a second by Commissioner Wispiski to adjourn this meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.